Uh, my name's Dale Walker, and I'm going to take you through the research and some of the important items in my book, Constitution to Crisis. Now, before we get started, I want to say that uh, this book involved a lot of research, and those books that you see on the shelf behind me were part of my research material. And I'm going to tell you about a few of those. But the basis for this book came as a result of my dissertation about 3 years ago. And it involved constructing a statement of cash flow for the government. Because if you've read the budget or tried to read the budget, you can't make heads or tails out of it, particularly statement of changes in cash balance, which is absolutely a ridiculous piece of paper. So I focused on that, and that was the basis for my dissertation. And it is in this book. Uh, it, uh, I'll show it to you as we go on. But what I want to say is that this book, if you're a congressman, this is a must read, and it's very readable. You don't have to go through uh, all the budgets and try to read through all that stuff. This is pretty simple. I put it in the budgets in an Excel spreadsheet for each agency, department, programs, and it's very simple to read, and you can spot abuses and ridiculous programs all the way through this thing. I mean, it's not rocket science to balance this budget, I can tell you. And if you're a congressman and you're not focused on reducing the budget, reducing the federal debt, uh, then you shouldn't be reelected in the next several elections because it's laid out there for you. So before we start, I want to tell you that in my research, I got involved in genealogy at our local library, and it really brought some things home to me that I want to share with you. My family came from Germany, along with a number of other immigrants who left Europe from 1600 to into the 1800s for a lot of different reasons, mostly because the governments were horrible, they were oppressive. People couldn't make a living, they couldn't support their families. Uh, the Catholic Church was just being really unruly. And they weren't, most of the immigrants were not able to practice their own religion. So it was really a tough time, particularly in the late 1600s and early 1700s. But my family, and I found this is part of it. See that becoming German. My family was part of the Palatine German in Germany in the early 1700s, and this migration uh, started in 1709. And my family, the Vaughts, at that point it was spelled Vogtt. It is now Vaught. But Vaughts left London and on a boat. I'm not going to call it a ship, it was a boat. And it usually took 4 to 6 weeks to cross the Atlantic, uh, assuming the weather was decent. But they arrived in Philadelphia in 1733, which means to me that they were here uh, prior to the American Revolution, and they were here when the country was being formed. And it's given me a sense of pride uh, to know that, and also that from what I read, the reasons for their leaving Europe was similar to the other ones, and for one reason why the migration to America resulted in the American Revolution and the formation of the 13 original states. And my family, as did a lot of them, they arrived in those ports, but they migrated to the southeastern United States into areas that they felt comfortable in. It probably reminded them of the homeland, and it also provided soil and weather in order for them to do the farming that most of them did. And also what you find is that a lot of those families grew to have 10, 15 children, and for a reason, because they needed farmhands, and also because they were from another country. They didn't speak English. Most, I don't imagine they did. So they formed communities of, might be of Germans, might be of other ethnicities, mainly because of religion and language. But the one thing that I did find is that when they did form communities, one of the first things they did was build a church. And the schools were a part of that church. And one common theme in what I've read is that the families were very strong, and they had their values were strong as far as educating their children, and also combining that with religion and education in order for their children to raise good kids with good values and being intelligent. And that's a pretty common theme from what I've read. But I would encourage you to check your family tree, find out when your family came, and see why they came here and where they located, and if they were indeed part of the revolution or what they did. But I can almost guarantee you that your family did contribute greatly to the formation of the United States. So from here, the first part of the book talks about Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and this is the way I read it. This is the way that I evaluated it, and you might read it some other way. But anyway, the articles and the reason that the articles were written this way is because you had 13 states, and basically each state, that a lot of them had their own religion, or there was religion in that state that they all got along together. And another common theme I found is that they were very permissive of other religions as long as they all worshiped God. That was a common theme. So they were okay with other religions as long as that was their sole worship. So what I have is Article 1, Section 8, established the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Okay, and then under that, having come off of the American Revolution, they wanted, and then they call it the Department of War, and that was so that those 13 states would have a central government that provided one army, so they wouldn't have to have 13 armies, and also to protect them against each other. I mean, some of those states just absolutely didn't get along. So a government army that justice, which would establish laws for the 13 states, so there wouldn't be different laws within each state, and a court system to establish and control those laws, and a Department of the Treasury. Obviously, you don't 13 different currencies, so you have one currency. Department of State, which help them to get along with each other, plus deal with foreign countries as far as commerce goes, and any foreign relations type issues. And then the District of Columbia was really not a part of the Constitution, but George Washington did establish that as the central home for government in Washington, D.C. So from there, I go with I start with those basic departments, and then I take you through each additional department or agency that was established from 1789 until present time, which the last one was Department of Homeland Security, established by George Bush after 2011 or 2001. I'm sorry. But the description of each department, it will tell you what was in the original department, when it was first established, what areas it was responsible for. But then I'll show you what services were added since the department was created and up until the present time. And it'll blow your mind. It's so stupid. But anyway, let's see. So one of the things that I talk about in here is how to balance the budget, and it would not be an easy task, but it can be done. And the bottom line is you go back to those departments that were established by the Constitution, and the rest of those services can go back to the states. Because that's what they wanted. They wanted to control certain things for themselves, and they just wanted the central government to just do those basic, provide those basic needs. And once you look at the departments that I call non-constitutional, you can understand why we're in the big mess that we're in. And also, of course, all that goes, the federal debt goes right along with that. So I've got tables the last 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16, for each agency, and list all the programs that are within each one. And let me see if I can find. Well, I can't find it. But anyway, there are probably, I'm going to say, almost 40 different areas that have budgets. And within those 40 budgets, there are almost 4,000 different programs. And if you go through it and look, you'll see that there's so much overlapping and so many things within some of these departments that actually have no relation to what they're supposed to be doing. And it's just really dumb. But toward the back, I've got a list. There is there's a list of budget for boards and commissions, and miscellaneous stuff, and this is where it really gets maddening. And this one list that I have in here is about almost $400 billion, and those could be dissolved easily, and at least start with taking $400 billion out of the deficit, out of the budget, because it's not an easy task, because the interest on federal debt is $600 billion a year, and it's part of the deficit. And until it's balanced, or at least until you have some extra funds to pay on the debt, it's not going to go down. And the debt's at 20 trillion right now, and you're talking about a little over 3% interest, which is $600 billion. It's not rocket science. So that would be the place to start, and I just don't know. But here's the list. You can't see that. There's other independent bureaus, and it's a full page. It's 2 full pages and part of another page, and it has some important features in there. Some things are important, but most of it's just junk. All it is junk. It's maddening. It's so ridiculous. But the statement of cash flow that I did, and it's in here. If you're in business, you understand what a statement of cash flow is. But it starts with the tax revenues, and then it shows what expenses are included, what's called operating activities, which for the government would be the normal operating expenses for the departments. So if you take the tax revenues and you deduct the expenses that are needed to operate government, then basically there is no money available after that for any other expenditure. And those other expenditures will include investing activities, which in our case, in the government case, is infrastructure, highways, buildings, all that kind of stuff. So there is no money for infrastructure, none. So then the third activity is called financing activities, and that is to cover payment on principal on federal debt. Of course, if there's no money for highways, you got no money for debt. So until the operating activities are cut, there's no money for highways or for payoff on federal debt. And one of the proposals I have in the book is that if you balance the budget, if you would take those departments that I determined to be non-constitutional, and you eliminate those, and you get back to, let's say the budget is $4 trillion. If you drop that to $2 trillion, and you got $3.5 trillion in tax revenue, then you've got $1.5 trillion excess tax revenues. Now, what I would suggest is that excess, that $1.5 trillion, is distributed back to the states based on population, which complies with the general welfare clause of the Constitution, and we need to talk about that in a minute too. So if those funds are distributed back to the states based on their population, they could run their own education department, they could run all kinds of different things by themselves, and it would be a lot more efficient, a lot more productive, and you wouldn't have government telling you what to do. So, I mean, it sounds easy. It would be a very difficult thing to do, but it can be done. But in order to pay off federal debt, you'd obviously have to leave some excess funds at the federal level to pay on the debt. But hopefully, if they did balance the budget and distribute all that money back to the states, it would improve the economies in all those states and generate additional tax revenue without tax rate increases at all, and possibly provide money for the government to pay on the federal debt. That's the only way I see it's going to work. So, and the other thing, I mentioned the General Welfare Clause. This was a big deal in the Constitution, and it's been so abused over the years. It's pathetic. The General Welfare Clause was, if you remember what I said about the 13 states and what they wanted, they said, we want these basic services provided by the government. Then, if the government provides any additional services, then those services must be provided equally over all the 13 states for the general welfare of those states. You can't pick and choose which states you want to give them to. You can't pick and choose the certain people that you want to have. The services must provide for all 13 states equally. That's the General Welfare Clause. It doesn't give the government any authority to do anything else. It just, Judge Napolitano said, it doesn't give the government authority to do anything. But if the government does it, it has to benefit all people. So, read the book. You'll see where we've gone wrong. And if you're a congressman, please do something. I mean, I'm tired of all of this stuff that I see in the news that it's his fault, it's her fault, and it's a Democrat's fault, Republican's fault. Folks, you're Congress, it's your fault. And when the election's coming up, if you don't do something constructive, I hope you don't get reelected. That's just the way it is. These people, not only the immigrants, but the men who wrote the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, they gave up everything they had. These men were wealthy, and most of them gave up everything they had, and a lot of them died doing it. So, we've got to remember the values that made this country the way it is. And give you an example, one of the books that I've read is called The 5,000-Year Leap by Cleon Skousen. It is an outstanding book, and he talks about natural law and the 28 principles of natural law that were written by Cicero prior to the birth of Christ. And those laws have endured for over 2,000 years, and they will continue. But those 28 principles are in his book, and all those natural laws were used as a basis for what's in the Constitution. And he outlines it for you and tells you exactly what the law does, what the natural law does, and how it's used in the Constitution. It's really, really a nice book. But I encourage you to read the book, study it, and particularly your family tree, and see where your family fits in all of this. Because if you find out your family contributed as mine did, it's going to really make you mad. And we've got to do something, folks, or we're going to, the result's not going to be good. but there's a way to do it. I mean, there's no way out of it that's going to be fun, but it's going to take some real courage in Congress and at the presidential level. And, I think we've got all the necessary things in place right now. We just do it. So I encourage you to study family tree, see where your family fits in, read my book, do some other research, and find out what I have about, what, I hate to use this,